The wind howled across the empty fields as Sarah tightened her threadbare shawl around her shoulders. Winter was coming early this year, biting through the air like a warning. Her little farmhouse sat on the edge of dying land, barely holding together, just like her life. Since her father passed and the bank kept calling, she'd been fighting battles no one saw. Each day was a test of grit, hunger, and hopelessness. The barn was barely used now except to shelter her last cow and a stack of hay she was stretching like it was gold. That night, she heard something more than the wind. A heavy knock, then another. She grabbed the old rifle, the one that had rusted more from neglect than use, and stepped out into the freezing dark. He was slumped against the barn door, mud-caked jeans, torn flannel, blood on his hands, a deep cut across his brow. She should have turned him away. No one just stumbled onto land like this anymore, not unless they were running or hiding. But something in his eyes, they weren't begging, they weren't cruel. They just looked tired. Like hers. He didn't speak. Could barely stand. She helped him into the barn, dragging him past the straw, laying him near the corner where the wind didn't bite so hard. She wrapped him in a wool blanket left over from her father's old army days. She even gave him the last of the canned soup she'd been saving for Sunday. She didn't ask questions. She had too many of her own. By morning, she expected him gone or dead. But when she opened the barn doors, the man stood there, cleaned up as much as the old water pump allowed. He held a folded paper in one hand, yellowed at the edges, and something unreadable in his expression. "I owe you more than a warm place," he said quietly. "Name's Colt. And as of today, so is this land. You've got 2,000 acres now just south of Ridge Hollow." Sarah blinked, thinking it was a cruel joke, until he pressed the deed into her calloused hands. And just like that, her world tilted. Sarah didn't say a word for a long while. She just stared at the paper in her hands, as if trying to make sense of the letters dancing in front of her eyes. 2,000 acres? No one gave land like that away. Not to strangers. Not to women like her. Her mouth parted to speak, but nothing came out. Her heart pounded too loud for words. Colt saw her confusion but didn't try to explain further. He looked different in the daylight, older than she first thought, maybe in his late 30s. Deep lines carved his sunburnt skin. His left hand trembled as he leaned against the wooden beam, still favoring his wounded side. But his eyes held something broken, something buried. She finally found her voice. "Why me?" He didn't smile. He didn't flinch. "Because you didn't ask who I was. You didn't ask what I did. You didn't look at me like trash. You just helped." It was the kind of answer that carried 1,000 untold stories. He said nothing more, just walked toward the open field behind the barn and stared out like he was waiting for something or someone. Sarah followed a few steps behind, holding the paper like it might vanish. Her hands still shook. Her mind screamed this wasn't real. She should run. She should call someone. But instead, she just stood there beside him in the silence. "I lost a lot," Colt said finally. "Too much. My brother, my home, my name. I wandered for months. No one would look me in the eye. People only see what they fear. But you," he stopped himself as if he'd said too much already. The wind picked up again, swirling dust around their feet. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "I don't need you to know me," he replied, voice low and steady. "I just need someone like you to have that land. Someone who still knows how to care." And before she could answer, he turned and started walking down the path that led nowhere. She stood frozen, heart pounding like a war drum, watching him disappear into the morning mist. Then something sharp broke the air, a gunshot, faint but clear, somewhere beyond the ridge. Her body stiffened. Who was this man she'd led into her barn? And what was really behind the gift? Sarah's feet moved before her mind caught up. She dashed toward the ridge, slipping in the frost-covered grass, clutching the land deed like a lifeline. The gunshot still echoed in her ears. Her thoughts spun. Was he being hunted? Was he in trouble? Or had he done something awful before ending up at her barn? She pushed through the thinning woods, breath catching in the cold air, until she saw him, Colt, half kneeling by a crooked wooden cross, barely visible through the overgrown brush. His head was bowed. In his hand, a revolver pointed toward the ground. Not smoking. Not fired. Yet his shoulders trembled like someone who'd just lost everything all over again. She hesitated, heart pounding. Then slowly stepped closer. He didn't turn. "This is where my brother died," he said, voice distant. "Right here. Shot in the back over land that wasn't worth dying for. I built a home here once. We dreamed big. But greed has no soul, Sarah. The men who took it, they don't bleed like we do." She said nothing, just watched him as he placed a worn, leather-bound journal beside the cross. His fingers lingered on it like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. "I gave you the land because I couldn't bear to see it rot in the hands of cowards," he continued. "I didn't just stumble into your barn. I came back to bury something and leave the rest behind." Sarah finally stepped beside him. "They're still looking for you, aren't they?" Colt looked up. His eyes met hers, haunted, tired, but no longer hiding. "They think I killed a man," he said. "And maybe I did, but not the way they say." The silence stretched. Sarah felt the weight of the sky press down on them both. What was she supposed to do now? Help a fugitive? Shelter a man with blood on his hands? But the way he spoke, the way he grieved, it didn't feel like guilt. Felt like survival. He stood up slowly, wincing from the wound at his side. "You can turn me in if you want. Or you can hold on to that land, make something good out of it. That's all I'm asking." Then he started walking again, not toward her farm, but toward the woods beyond. "Where will you go?" she asked, her voice trembling. He stopped, but didn't turn. "Someplace no one knows my name." Then he was gone again, swallowed by the trees. And Sarah was left holding 2,000 acres of land, and a secret that could destroy them both. Sarah didn't sleep that night. The land deed lay on the kitchen table like a ghost, haunting, silent, and too heavy to ignore. Every time the wind tapped the shutters, she looked toward the barn, half expecting him to return. But Colt didn't come back. By sunrise, she made her decision. She saddled her mare, packed a small bag, tucked the deed and Colt's journal inside, and rode into town. It was a quiet morning. The streets still damp from last night's frost. The general store barely open. But the sheriff's office always open. Sheriff Briggs stood behind the desk, a man built like the kind of law he served. Hard, straight-backed, unbending. She stepped in. He looked up, surprised. "Sarah Whitley, everything all right?" "I need to talk about the man who came to my barn," she said. "The cowboy." His face darkened. "Name?" "He called himself Colt," she said. "And I think you've been looking for him." Briggs folded his arms. "You know where he is?" She hesitated. Every instinct screamed against it, but she wasn't here to betray. She was here to ask. "He left. I don't know where, but I need to know what happened. The truth. He didn't seem like a killer." Briggs studied her carefully. "He and his brother used to work the land east of Millstone Ridge. Good hands. Quiet. But trouble found them. His brother was murdered in a land dispute," Colt snapped. "Folks say he shot the man who did it, and then vanished." "Folks say," Sarah echoed. Briggs nodded. No trial. No confession. Just a corpse and a missing cowboy. She placed the journal on the desk. He left this at the grave. I think it tells a different story. The sheriff opened it slowly. Pages worn, filled with two brothers' dreams, maps of crops, notes about fences, and finally, entries about threats, warnings, and a plan to buy back land that was stolen through forged contracts. There were names, places, dates. Briggs read quietly. His jaw clenched. Why bring this to me? He asked. Because it's not justice if you only hear one side, Sarah said. He gave a short nod. I'll look into it. You did the right thing. But as she stepped back into the morning light, the doubt still clung to her. Had she saved him? Or put him back in danger? Then her eyes caught something, a figure across the street. Ragged coat, limp in his walk, face lowered beneath his hat. Colt? He'd come back. And this time he wasn't running. Colt didn't speak at first. He just stood there, watching her like he wasn't sure he was welcome anymore. Sarah crossed the street slowly, heart pounding harder with every step. You came back, she whispered. He gave a slight nod, his voice gravelly. Had to. I thought you were gone for good. I was going to be. But I couldn't leave without knowing if I still had a place here. She looked at him, this man worn by dust and sorrow, whose eyes carried lifetimes of silence. You gave me 2,000 acres, Colt? Why? He looked down, then met her gaze again. Because you gave me a night under a roof. Because you didn't ask who I was or what I'd done. Because you looked at me like I was a man, not a ghost. Sarah's throat tightened. He stepped closer. My brother and I dreamed of that land. We worked for it, saved for it. But someone wanted it more. They forged papers. Paid off officials. And when we fought back, they killed him. And blamed you, she said quietly. I ran, yeah. Not because I was guilty, but because I knew they'd bury the truth. I've been gathering proof ever since. I was waiting for someone honest enough to carry the rest of it if I didn't make it. You thought I'd take your fight? No. I thought maybe you'd protect the land. Keep it alive. That would have been enough. Sarah swallowed the lump in her throat. But it's not enough anymore, is it? Colt shook his head. I want to clear my name, Sarah. I want to come back to life. She reached out and took his hand. It was cold, rough, trembling. Then let's do it together. For the first time, the cowboy smiled, not the broken, cautious grin from the barn, but a real smile. One that reached his eyes. They walked side by side through the town, past the whispers, past the staring faces. Two people, one accused, one weathered, choosing to stand against a storm much bigger than either of them. And behind them, the sheriff read every line of that journal with growing dread. The names it named weren't just ranchers. They were men in office. Men with badges. The real story had only just begun. The courtroom was packed. Not with spectators of justice, but vultures circling a story they thought they already knew. Colt stood at the front, hair trimmed, suit borrowed, jaw clenched like steel. Sarah sat behind him, her presence silent but fierce, like a wall holding him upright. The prosecutor painted him a villain, drifter, deserter, a bitter man driven by revenge. But when Colt took the stand, his voice cut through the room like a blade. Calm. Steady. Full of pain, not rage. I ran because I watched the law let my brother die, he said. I watched them plant evidence on our land. I watched them steal everything we'd built. I ran not because I was guilty, but because I thought the truth was dead. Then Sarah took the stand. She wasn't a lawyer. She wasn't polished. But when she opened the journal, page by page, reading names, dates, bribes, maps, something shifted. People stopped breathing. She showed the survey lines, the false signatures. She told them how she found a wounded man in her barn and how he'd changed her life not by giving her land, but by giving her purpose. Colt didn't come to my farm for shelter, she said. He came because he didn't know where else in this world would still see him as human. I did. And I still do. The judge called for recess. Colt didn't speak. He just looked at her, eyes burning. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Reporters screamed questions. But the only voice Colt heard was Sarah's. I'm not scared, she told him. He looked at her like she was the first light after a brutal winter. Neither am I, he whispered. But inside, the corrupt knew their time was running out. A storm was building, and it wasn't the cowboy they feared. It was the woman who stood beside him. The verdict day arrived under a sky swollen with thunder, like even the heavens knew justice had waited too long. Sarah stood at the back of the courtroom, arms folded tight against her chest, watching Colt with every ounce of hope she had left. He didn't glance back this time. He didn't need to. Her presence was stitched into his spine. The judge entered. The courtroom hushed. All charges against Colt Harris, a pause so heavy it crushed the air, are dropped. This court finds him not guilty. Gasps echoed. A few claps rose timidly before sweeping into full applause. But Colt didn't smile. Not yet. The real battle had just begun. Because moments later, as Colt walked down the steps of the courthouse, a black SUV blocked his path. Out stepped Sheriff Burroughs, the man whose name appeared more than any other in that journal. Don't think this ends here, Burroughs growled low enough for only Colt to hear. You poke too deep, that land won't save you. But Colt didn't flinch. He stepped in close, calm as a sunrise. It's not just land anymore. It's home. And I ain't running this time. He walked past him, slow and sure. Later that night, Sarah found Colt sitting on the porch of the house they were rebuilding together. The fields in the distance stretched wide and endless, and for once they didn't feel lonely. They'll come after us, she said. They'll try, Colt replied. But we've got something they don't. She sat beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. What's that? A truth that doesn't scare easy. In the distance, lightning cracked over the hills. But the barn stood tall, the land held strong, and the cowboy who once slept in its shadows now guarded it like something sacred. The world hadn't gone soft. But this corner of it had grown roots. Spring came like a quiet miracle. The fields, once dry, cracked, and forgotten, blushed green again. Calves were born. The barn buzzed with new life. And Sarah, now wearing a denim jacket 3 sizes too big and boots, still muddy from dawn, laughed more easily. Colt was no longer a ghost in borrowed clothes. He was a man of the land, sleeves rolled, eyes steady, building fence posts and futures with the same calloused hands. People in town had started tipping their hats instead of turning their backs. Not all, but enough. Word had spread that the mysterious cowboy had won back stolen land. That the woman who sheltered him was now a partner in something bigger than both of them. One morning, as Sarah was unloading feed, she found an envelope nailed to the barn door. Inside was a letter, no name, no signature, just 4 words scrawled in a hurried hand. We believe in you. She stared at it, lips trembling, then smiled through tears. Later that evening, under a sky washed with stars, Colt knelt beside the stone he'd placed behind the barn, his brother's name carved into it with care. We did it, Eli, he whispered. We didn't just survive. We planted something that'll outlive them all. Sarah joined him, wrapping a blanket around their shoulders. Silence settled, soft, safe, sacred. Then Colt pulled a small box from his coat. Didn't think I'd ever ask anyone this, he said, voice tight with nerves, but I guess you've been proving me wrong since day one. Her breath caught. I don't have much, he said, opening the box to reveal a simple silver ring, but I've got a name cleared, a land honest, and a heart that's yours if you want it. Sarah didn't answer with words. She just kissed him. Long certain. With everything she'd ever lost and everything she'd finally found. That night, the barn lights stayed on. Not because someone was lost in the dark, but because 2 people had finally found home.